Okay, guys, we're going to get your attention. For those who weren't up in the field house, I'll introduce Yuri again. Yuri Elkaim. He graduated from this program that you're in right now. Okay, graduated from this program. Was a varsity soccer player for 5?
That's right, 4.
4. Varsity soccer player, that's because you only needed 4 years to get out here.
That's right.
Was also then the goalkeeper coach for the men's varsity team for a short period. After that, strength and conditioning coach for how many years?
6, 7, somewhere in that area.
Gave that up a couple years ago. He's a family man now. Just one was a little bit more.
10 days ago.
10 days ago, got a second child. What do you think?
Practice safe sex, guys. Practice. Because your freedom is gone after that.
So yeah, Yuri has a lot of experience in the strength and conditioning and nutrition area. He's going to speak on both of those topics for us today with specific applications of soccer, but his business pertains to athletes of many different sports. So any broader general questions, I'm sure you can take those on as well.
Absolutely not. Awesome.
Turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Guido. It's great to be here. I love speaking to individuals who are passionate about soccer, even if you're not passionate, as long as you have an interest in this kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Soccer is a great game. It's probably one of the best sports to train for. I personally think so. So I'm going to show you guys how to train for soccer, whether it be for yourself or for people that you're coaching. Just to show of hands, how many of you guys are going to go into coaching of some kind with respect to soccer? Or just sports in general, I guess. Okay, so most of this stuff can apply to pretty much all sports as well. There's going to be some nuances, but for the most part, everything I'm about to teach you is going to be pretty solid. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at the 2 big reasons for soccer conditioning, the FIFA 11 Plus program, which we just went through in the field house, a yearly training breakdown. So I'm going to give you guys an example of a yearly training program, the importance of nutrition, and there we go. So let's start off by, and again, if you guys have any questions at any point, just let me know. I want to keep this interactive, and I don't want you guys falling asleep, especially after eating pizza. So let's talk about why proper conditioning is important. That's right. So first of all, this is a big one: injury prevention. How many of you guys have ever sustained an injury playing a sport? Pretty much all of you, right? I was giving a talk at Nike 2 years ago to a bunch of runners. There's about 35 runners in the room, and I asked, how many of you guys have ever had an injury due to running? Every single one of them put up their hands. And the reality is, with running, the stats show that anywhere from 36 to 55% of runners will have an injury at some point. There's a reason for that. It's a very repetitive motion, right? Soccer involves running, but there's a lot of other things going on as well. Lateral movements, explosive movements. If you're not doing things properly, you become a liability to your team, right? You end up sitting on the bench and you don't play. So injury prevention is really important. The other important reason is performance. Hi. You look at guys like Cristiano Ronaldo, right? If you look at any of these guys, they take their shirts off after the game. They're not flabby guys like they were in the 70s. These guys are ripped. They're machines. And they train to be such. Okay, and it's not just about looking good, but they train in specific ways to help them perform like they need to on the field. Okay, so these are the 2 big reasons why conditioning is important: injury prevention and performance. And this is across the board for any sport. Okay, let's start off with injury prevention. So a study in the American Journal of Sports Medicine in 2000 showed that, I'm going to just give you a couple examples here, but there's a lot of research in respect to soccer. They looked at 300 female soccer players ages 14 to 18, so probably rep of that kind of rep soccer players. They were studied over a 1-year period, and 42 of these players participated in a 7-week training program before the start of the season. The other ones did not. The type, mechanism, and severity of the injury, when the injury occurred, the number of games or practices missed, and type of shoe worn were all recorded. So they looked at all these different variables. And essentially what it comes down to is this: the trained group experienced a significantly lower incidence of injury than the untrained group. Okay, so you guys are all in phys ed. You all understand the importance of training your muscles, getting your tendons and everything needs to be such, right? So this is the simple finding was the fact that simply by training, and I'm not too sure of the nature of the training program, simply by training, they were able to reduce our injuries. So downstairs we went through a version of a dynamic warm-up. And a dynamic warm-up, how many of you guys have ever seen a team or been part of a team where before the game, before whatever you're doing, you all stood around and started, stretching for 30 seconds, stuff like that. That's called static stretching, and that is the devil. That needs to stop, okay? The dynamic warm-up is the opposite. A dynamic warm-up incorporates 4 components, 3 of which we touched on downstairs. The first one is about raising core temperature. And that means we need to start moving to raise the temperature of your body. Okay? In so doing, you increase the elasticity of your muscles, and that's very important. A very simple way to think about this is if you put an elastic band in the freezer and then took it out and stretched it, what would happen? It would snap, right? But if you put that elastic band in the oven at like 200, nothing too hot, for 5 minutes, you'd warm it up a bit, it would probably stretch a bit farther. Okay? Exactly the same thing happens with your muscles. They need to be warm to become more elastic. So that's the first component. So that's what we started downstairs. We started doing that kind of light jogging back and forth. That's the initial stage of raising your core temperature. What was your, sorry, I didn't get your name. Yeah? Edries. So you stopped the warm-up just near the end because you said you were sweating and you never changed your clothes. That's what you want to have happen. No, it's totally good. And I told him, I'm like, that's exactly what you want to have happen. If by the end of the warm-up, you are slightly out of breath and you're sweating, that's a good sign. Because there's also hormonal changes that are happening. You're increasing epinephrine, which is going to stimulate some important things as well. The second component is looking at ROM exercises, range of motion exercises. So instead of holding a stretch, like this, which just stretches your quad, what we want to do is look at, well, what are the joints, okay? The hip joint, the knee joint, the ankle joint. What are they involved in the sport, okay? They're going to be doing some kicking, they're going to be doing some jumping. So can we do some exercises, some dynamic exercises that are going to mimic those movements and prepare those muscles and joints for what's coming ahead? So as an example, instead of stretching your quad, you can do kickbacks. Okay, so this would be an example of a kickback. You're just kind of kicking your bum. You could do some leg swings. Okay, so now you're warming up that kicking motion. You're getting all those that kind of lubrication through the synovial joints in the hip and the knee, and you're loosening up those muscles as they're about to be used in the sport. The third element is neuromuscular activation, control, and balance. This is probably one of the most important reasons for a dynamic warm-up. Experience from our guys. Like how many games did we go into and we're just flat for the first 5-10 minutes, right? Part of that is how you prepare for the game. And if your nervous system is not firing on all cylinders by the time the ref blows the whistle, you're not neuromuscularly, your nervous system is not tuned in yet. And that means you're not going to be as explosive, you're not going to be as powerful, and you're going to take a couple minutes to get into the game. By that point, it might be 1 or 2-0. Okay? So this neuromuscular component is very important. And in order to help with that, we'd incorporate the following component, which is plyometrics, speed, and agility. So the third segment of the FIFA 11 Plus warm-up we did downstairs, we did some bounding exercises, right? So those would be an example of plyometrics. We started doing some cut and changing of angles. That's an example of a speed and agility type of exercise, and it also is going to prepare you for that kind of stuff in a game. Because if you just went and jogged around the field for 10 minutes and then started getting into a game after that, well, when are we ever jogging on the field, right? The research shows that in soccer there's a change of pace every 5 to 6 seconds and a change of direction. So you need to warm up like that, you need to train like that in order to play like that. So those are the 4 main reasons for a dynamic warm-up. This is very important as well. Proper sequencing and progression are very important. If you start off by doing plyometrics and then finish your warm-up with a nice easy jog, you're doing things backwards. And what you're going to do is you're going to increase your risk of injury because you haven't warmed up your body before getting into some of those bounding exercises. And then by finishing off with some light jogging, you're actually depressing your nervous system. So by the time the game's ready to start, you no longer are jazzed up and ready to go. Okay, so the sequencing of progression is very important. So the FIFA 11 Plus program. This is a warm-up that FIFA has come up with a couple years ago now, and they started to use it around the world with various clubs, professional as well as amateur. So this is the website. If you guys want to actually download this, you don't have to write down the whole URL, but if you go to www.f-mark.com, that's the main site for this FIFA 11 program. So if you want to download the PDFs, the videos, everything we just went through, you can download it there. It's really, really good. It's awesome that they put this together. Because what it does is it gives coaches of all levels a standardized warm-up program that is suitable for pretty much all players. I would definitely add some things in, but for the most part, it's pretty solid. And that's what we went through downstairs. So 15 exercises total. It takes about 20 minutes. Part 1, as we went through, involves running exercises at a slow speed combined with active stretching or dynamic exercises and controlled partner contacts. So we did the shoulder-to-shoulder and landing stuff. Part 2, this is the optional part, which you generally, you wouldn't do this necessarily before a game. This is mainly to be done in training during the week, about twice during the week. 6 sets of exercises focusing on core and leg strength, balance, plyometrics, and agility, each with 3 levels of increased difficulty. I showed you guys the first level for each exercise. And part 3 is we finish off the warm-up with some running exercises at moderate to high speed combined with planting and cutting movements. Again, getting us closer to game situation. We want to become ready for the game. So before a game, we would be doing part 1 and part 3 only. Part 2, we would add in if we're doing a training session. Okay? Any questions with that? Yeah?
Is it called 11 plus because of the age group?
I don't know. I think what they wanted to do, I actually got confused initially. I thought it was another EA Sports soccer game. And then I was like, why do they call it 11 plus? I think they just wanted to mimic 11 players in the field, but then they realized, hold on, there's more than 11 exercises, so maybe they put a plus. I'm not too sure. But it could be applicable to 11-year-olds as well, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so here's some cool stuff. So they actually they did some studies, some pretty extensive studies on this program, and they showed that teams that performed the 11 plus program regularly, at least twice per week, had 37% fewer training injuries and 29% fewer match injuries. That's pretty significant. Severe injuries, like blown out ACLs, were reduced by 50%. So imagine your best players are actually on the field as opposed to on the bench because they didn't warm up properly. That's pretty significant. And these initial findings were published in the British Medical Journal in 2008. And there's been studies that have been kind of independent now. In Switzerland, there was one that was released about a year ago showing the exact same stuff. Okay, so you could look at every single study, they're going to see the same, you're going to see the same numbers more or less. The field setup for the warm-up is pretty much what we did downstairs. We have 2 lines of cones. Okay, so we got 1 line of cone, the other line about 5 to 6 meters apart. And then part 2, right, so the core exercises and stuff like that would be done on the other side of the field. So if you want reference to this, just go to the site. You can download all this stuff. It's absolutely free. Okay, let's get into the good stuff, the conditioning. It's all good stuff, actually. It's all important. Okay, so in conditioning, let me ask you guys, what do you think is the most dominant energy system or type of requirements in terms of conditioning for soccer? Like aerobic, anaerobic, power, strength, speed, agility. Just throw them out. Aerobic? You guys taking theory of strength and conditioning? Aerobic, pretty much? Okay, so you guys are spot on, actually. That's good. Okay, but there's also other things. So we have the aerobic, we got the muscular endurance, proprioception stuff. You guys know what proprioception is? Okay. Core, strength, power, aerobic, anaerobic. There's a lot of different things. So the challenge is, how do you train for a sport that has so many different demands? train for diving, outside of the spins and all that stuff, which is amazing, it's pretty straightforward. How do you get more vertical distance off the platform, right? So it's essentially a combination of strength and power. That's pretty much all divers would have to do, to my knowledge. What are some other sports that are pretty basic in terms of one energy system or one type of shot put? Okay, so what would be the energy system or kind of demand of that sport? Power. So a lot of power-based movements, Olympic lifts, stuff like that. That's why those guys are 250 pounds and they're not running laps around the track, right? They're training specific to their sport. Soccer is different because you have to have power, you have to have strength. You have to be able to run 90 minutes. You have to be able to change pace back and forth. There's a lot of different demands. So it's challenging but exciting to train for this. Bangsbo, for any of you guys that are interested in looking at this kind of research, he's like the godfather of soccer-related conditioning research. So any kind of stuff that he comes out with, it's pretty bang on. So in '94, he was one of the first ones to look at, okay, what are the actual energy demands of soccer? So he looked at outfield players, and he basically, with all his devices, came up with the fact that the average work rate during a soccer match is approximately 70% of your max VO2. 70% would equate to this kind of jogging pretty much for most elite athletes. It's pretty much your talk test pace. You're not out of breath. That's the average of a soccer game. However, we know that's very different in experience. So aerobic energy production appears to account for more than 90% of total energy consumption during a game, which is pretty significant. So that means that we need to train to get this aerobic system at a very, very elevated level. However, there are very wrong ways to do this, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Blood samples taken after soccer matches show that the lactate concentrations average 3 to 9 millimoles and up to past 10 millimoles. Basically what this means is that the body is also producing quite a bit of lactic acid. And if you played soccer, you know that when you start moving around, you get that burn in the legs, that's lactic acid at work. So again, the anaerobic energy system, which is where we start to train this lactic acid stuff, is very important as well because it's also an integral component of soccer. Glycogen, you guys know what glycogen is, right? Stored carbohydrates in the muscle and liver. In this case, glycogen in the working muscles seems to be the most important substrate, fuel, for energy production during soccer matches. Knowing this is very important for what you do after a soccer match or a training session in terms of nutrition. And this is where I would say 90% of soccer players and people who work out in general get it all wrong. And we'll talk about that as well. So here's the typical North American schedule. If you play on a rep team or if you play on an MLS team, the general season is you have the off season between December and March. Maybe Caps would disagree with that because you have no off season. The preseason generally would be kind of April and May. So again, if you play on a soccer team, like a men's team, you'd start up April and May, and the season would start late May and October. Okay, so that's generally what we're working with. University, if you play at the University of Toronto, off season is generally January to April. The preseason is a couple weeks in August, and the season is September to November. That's pretty much what we're working with. If you play in Europe, this is totally different. If you play in Europe, your season starts July and it ends end of June, pretty much. So you have 2 weeks off, more or less. Okay, so let's talk about the off season. So the off season, there's a couple things we need to think about. What is the goal of the off season? So if we're in January and we play at the University of Toronto, our season starts 9 months later. Is the goal right away to build up our aerobic endurance right off the bat, or are there other things that we can attend to? Well, here's what I believe, and this is really what a lot of the research supports as well, is that we need to focus on building a good, solid strength and muscular endurance foundation 9 months before the season starts. Okay, we have time to work on the other stuff afterwards. So in phase 1, for instance, this would last 4 weeks. The focus here would be on development of muscular, proprioceptive, and strength bases. Okay, so let's just use the example. We'd start January 1st. We'd work for the first 4 weeks in January on doing this type of stuff. how would we do it? Well, we could use some full body circuit training, using about 6 to 8 exercises per workout. We do this about 3 to 4 times a week, and generally for each exercise, 8 to 12 reps. Now, in most cases, you may or not be training with the team, depending on who you're playing with. But if you are, all of your on-field stuff is taken care of on-field. That's where you'll get your aerobic conditioning in, your anaerobic conditioning in. When we're in the gym, we're training to gain strength. We're not using the gym to build aerobic base. Okay. So here's a sample workout. We could do a circuit which would combine squats, push-ups, a plank, which is a core exercise, kettlebell swings. Do you guys use kettlebells at all? Yes. If you guys had one thing to use, and that was it would be the kettlebell. It's amazing. Kettlebell swings, standing one-arm cable chest press. So that basically you're at a cable machine and you're pushing it like this. Okay, so a little bit more specific than laying on a bench doing bench press, because in soccer, I don't know about you, but quite often I'd find myself on the ground having to do this in a soccer match, right? Not really. So we want to be specific. In a game, you might be pushing somebody off like this, so why not train like that? So it's all about specificity, especially as we get closer to the season. Step ups, so you have a step or a bench you step up onto, and that's kind of like a one-legged squat. And then we can do a side plank. So this is a 7 exercise circuit that you could do in phase 1. Let's say 10 reps per exercise, 30 seconds rest between exercises, 1 minute between sets. So the fact that you're giving yourself 30 seconds rest and you're going through these 7 exercises, in and of itself, this actually will get your heart rate going, which means that this is also a cardiovascular workout while you're building a good base. Yeah.
How many times do you do this circuit?
There you go, 3 sets. Again, there's no golden rule whether it's 2 sets, 4 sets, 3 sets. There's a lot of research that continues to come out saying if you just did 1 workout, 3 sets once a week, you're good in terms of maintenance. But in terms of building, we want to increase the volume initially. Yeah?
What age group or level of, for elite athletes, you would do something different? For maybe more beginning athletes, would you do?
Yeah.
Would you switch it around?
For sure. So people who've never had access to a gym, you wouldn't want to do this stuff with. Okay, you want to start off with body weight exercises. So for all of this stuff, you can do body weight, squats, okay, push-ups, planks, all body weight, kettlebell swings, not obviously body weight. Standing one-arm cable chest press, you could actually have them work with a partner, and if they're standing across each other, just pushing at each other, like it would be hand on hand, or pushing each other's shoulder and just working on stability and pressing. Step ups, as long as you have anything you can step up onto, you can do that, and a side plank. So these are pretty much all body weight exercises, other than 2 or 3 of them, kind of, right? Obviously, the more advanced somebody is, the more experience they've had in the gym. Technique is very important. So if someone's never done a squat and they start doing squats and they're coming forward on their knees and or on their toes and their knees are buckling in, you want to stop that, right? You want to teach them how to do a squat properly and work them through this. So this is the stuff I'm going to show you are based on assumptions that the people you're working with are going to be taught how to do this stuff or know how to do this stuff. Obviously, there's going to be progressions for every single one. Okay, so speaking of the squat, I'm going to show you why it's so important. This is the fundamental movement for any sporting activity. So we have the squat. This is actually a front squat in which the bar is placed on the front of the shoulders. And this is a back squat in which the bar is on the back of the shoulders. What do you guys think is the benefit of doing a front squat? If you guys are taking biomechanics at all? Or just in general?
There's less pressure on your lower back. What it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's the big thing. So dramatically reduce compressive forces on the lower back in the front squat. If you do a back squat, and again, depends if you have a longer torso, shorter legs, all that's gonna change your position in the squat. So for me, if I'm doing a back squat, I know that my torso is angled at about 45 degrees in that position, which means that becomes a huge compressive load on my lower back. And a couple Christmases ago, on Christmas Eve day, I buckled under 315 pounds doing squats. And the rule, always keep the bar inside the squat rack. Don't take it out of the squat rack. Okay. So after having that accident, I started doing front squats pretty much exclusively, because doing these, no problem. Doing these, I can still feel it sometimes. Okay. So the other cool thing about a front squat is that it's a very, very good core exercise. If you do it properly, at the bottom of the motion, as you start pushing up, there's a huge amount of core activation. So instead of doing thousands of sit-ups, do a couple sets of front squats, and that's the best way to train your core. One of the best ways. So aside from this stuff, the reason I want to show you guys the importance of squats is that if you look at the sprinter here, look at the angle at the hip. Okay? Let's just look at the angle at the hip here. What do you guys notice? It's the same, right? Angle at the knee, angle at the knee. What do you guys notice? It's the same, okay? So basically what I'm trying to share with you guys is that if I kind of rotated that squat picture, we would essentially be in a sprinting position. So when you want to run faster, jump higher, it all starts with squats, okay? Was there a question? Yeah.
So, are you like promoting one over the other, like the squat core?
Well, I work for the Front Squat Incorporated company. No, I think, again, it depends on the individual, but I think for most individuals, the safest thing to do is a front squat. However, it's more technically advanced than a back squat. So I would say start off back squatting with low weight. Just have a barbell on your back, get comfortable with it. As you start to load up and stuff, then you can start to move towards a front squat, because it's a very different feeling in terms of the load. You're going to feel kind of like you're falling back. Yeah, you're going to feel like you're falling back a lot. So, yeah.
For the front squat, aren't you supposed to have like your elbows out as high as you can? So someone who doesn't have like flexibility.
Yeah, so that's another limitation. If you got poor wrist flexion, or if you can't get your upper arms up, like this picture here. Can I get the laser? Where are you? Oh, anyways, this guy here, his elbows are like 45 degrees. Okay, they should be up here, right?
So what would you do if someone did? I guess you'd work on their shoulders.
Yeah, you could definitely do some shoulder mobility type of exercises. Just the mobility is very important. Okay, to be able to do a squat properly, and I've worked with like a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of variation in terms of like people physically, for whatever reason, they can't squat on their heels, right? They're coming forward like that, and it's like you teach them as much as possible. You could even put a belt around them, pulling them back, or have them sit onto a bench. But physically, because they're so stiff in their Achilles tendons, they've got tight quads, they can't even get down. So there's a lot of different things you want to look at there. Yeah.
Would you say it's a lot harder to like do higher weights from front squat though?
Probably, yeah. In general, it's going to be harder to do heavier weights than anything. But specifically because there's so much core integration on the front squat that, and obviously there's a different range of motion, you can go lower and stuff like that, it's definitely tougher. So if you can back squat 315, you're not going to be back squatting 300 on a front squat unless you train that. So the squat is an integral component of athletic development. Okay, so we've done our phase one, we've built our muscular endurance, we've done some circuit training, we have a good feel for some of the exercises. Phase two would be the next 4 to 8 weeks. So let's say February through March. The focus here is now on building strength. We've built a foundation of, let's say, squats using 10 reps. And are you guys all familiar with training modalities or training like reps and sets for different things like hypertrophy, strength, power? So I don't have to repeat that. You guys are good at that? Okay. So in this case, the focus would be strength. The modality would be using big movements, sport-specific exercises, 2 to 3 times a week. As you start incorporating more strength stuff, you don't need to do as much of it. 4 to 8 reps per exercise, 1 and 2 minutes rest between exercises. Okay? So here the idea is not to be out of breath. It's to kind of train like those guys on the track upstairs, where they do a sprint and they come back and they get on their cell phone, or they read a magazine. That's kind of how you start to train when we're talking strength and power. Lots of rest, because it's neuromuscular. You need the nervous system to be at 100%. Yeah?
In terms of the rest, can you go through the minutes? Because I read some studies that suggest 3 plus.
Yeah, you can do 5 minutes. Yeah, for sure. It's again, but it's...
Is 2 minutes the minimum you need? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of like an arbitrary number. It depends on the weight you're using. It depends how you recover between exercises. the rule of thumb is if you don't feel 100% before the next set, take more time. Because you don't want to be doing a set of 4 repetition squats and feeling like you can't do 4 reps, right? Because otherwise you're just doing muscular endurance type stuff or hypertrophy training. So that becomes the focus of phase 2. We start to build a really strong foundation for strength. Sample strength workout, deadlifts. You guys know how to do a deadlift? Okay, so again, we're kind of taking a weight off the floor, back is flat, coming up to standing. Another fundamental movement because again, it mimics that squatting pattern. Bench press, again, is it applicable to soccer? Not really, but the reality is that having pressing strength, when you use this, for instance, in combination with like a standing pushing movement, can be beneficial. Front squats, so these would all be like 6 reps, for instance. TRX, you guys know the TRX pulley system? TRX back rows, amazing for stability and definitely challenging. If you do those max reps, that's very, very tough on those upper back muscles. Kettlebell swings, 6 to 12, going heavy. The reason I put 12 here is because I don't know if there are kettlebells heavy enough to challenge most people for only 6 reps. If you've trained already for 2 months and you've used kettlebells, okay? I think the heaviest that I've used is like a 28 kilo, which is 60 pounds, somewhere in that area. There's probably heavier ones, but you could probably do a 28 kilo well more than 6 reps, okay? But in terms of developing posterior chain, kettlebell swings just destroy, amazing. And then pull-ups, you know, it's not very sport specific, but it fits in nicely in terms of building upper body strength and so forth. You can replace pull-ups with pretty much anything else you want to. I just put it in there as a sample. And the reality, as Shaki can attest to, is a lot of guys are like, oh, you know, I want to get in shape for the summer, get the beach bod. So the reality is it's nice to have good arms. Complete 3 sets of each exercise. So this would be a superset. So you do, for instance, 1A and 1B back to back. You'd finish those 3 sets, given the rest in between, obviously. Then you move to these 2. Then you move to those 2. Then what you'll notice here is that they're non-competing exercises. Okay, deadlift does not compromise your bench press unless you're tired from doing the deadlift. But it's a pull and a push. Front squats, push, TRX back rows, pull. Kettlebell swings, kind of a circular fluid motion, pull-ups. There might be a bit of compromise there on the arms, but by that point it doesn't really matter in the workout. The important stuff is done at the beginning. Any questions with phase 2? Are we good so far? Is everyone following? We good? Okay, so phase 3 would be 8 weeks and plus. This would take us out of March into April, May. Here now we're transitioning. We've built our strength base. Now we can start getting into power, which is more kind of plyometric, explosive stuff. And we can start looking at developing an aerobic base, because we're going to need that for soccer. Catch 22 though. Have you guys learned that aerobic training compromises power and strength?
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the studies where just like one session of running decreases testosterone levels significantly in the blood? So, you know, we have this compromise. So now it even makes soccer training even more interesting, where you've spent all this time building strength, and now we got to start incorporating aerobic training. And if we did nothing else but run, we would just kind of shoot all our progress down the drain. Okay, so that's why this is very important to maintain. So what's the solution? Well, we'll have a look. Okay, so here's a sample strength and power workout. We would start transitioning into Olympic-based movements like hang cleans. Have you guys ever done those?
Yes.
So barbell type exercise, kind of just hangs at the thigh, and you just explode it up. So again, it's mimicking that jumping motion. Med ball chest pass throws. Again, you'd have a brick wall, not drywall, and you use a medicine ball and just explode it back and forth. You could also do a throw-in in place of that. Box jumps, you have a box, you jump up onto the box, come back down. That's a plyometric type of movement. Push press, you'd have a barbell here at the shoulders, and you basically go down to a micro squat and then explode it above the head. Single leg box push-offs. So this is like a step up. So you have a box, but instead of just stepping up onto it, you would actually explode. So if I'm stepping up, I'll just step up onto the chair here. Hopefully it doesn't shatter. So if I'm stepping up, this is a step up, okay? This leg push-off would be, I'm literally jumping up and driving the opposite knee. Okay, so you're jumping off the box, driving that opposite leg. And then we'd have clap push-ups as an example, as a kind of an upper body explosive movement. Very low reps, 4, 6. Again, we're not looking to get tired here. We're looking to keep the nervous system 100%. If you feel tired, you stop. If that's 2 reps, doesn't matter. It's got to be 100% effort. And a lot of times in the power phase, we're not using as heavy a weight as we would be in the strength phase. It might be 60, 65% of max weights, looking at moving it as fast as possible. Again, resting a little bit more here, 5 minutes in some cases if you want to. 2 or 3 times a week. And here's another thing to realize, guys, is that there's still a lot of questions out there with respect to training. What I'm about to show you, maybe in 10 years won't even be valid. Maybe there's better ways of training. Maybe it's 1 workout a week. Maybe it's 1 workout with 1 set of each exercise at your max possible exertion, and you call it a day. And maybe that's the best way to train. And there's some studies that are starting to show that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see what's going to be happening over the next couple of years. Okay, so let's tackle this demon here. Aerobic workout. So when I talk about aerobic, I'm not talking about like, Saturday morning aerobics class at Good Life. I'm talking about like going for a run. So this would be a sample running aerobic workout. Hop on the treadmill, go on the track, 25 minutes, 75% of your max heart rates. Okay? So that's the typical, let's go for a jog for 25 minutes. That's the old school way of training. Generally, if you're doing this kind of stuff, you're going to add 10% per week. In this case, 4 weeks, because the phase 3, the way I'm going to build it out is about 4 weeks. So you're adding 10% per week for 4 weeks. So that's either 10% of the intensity or 10% of the duration, not both. Okay, so 1 week it could be either 1 to 2 sessions per week. Again, we're still 4 or 5 months out of the actual season, so we don't need to spend too much time on this. However, this is where you should be spending most of your time as you start developing more of an aerobic base. Interval training. You guys know about interval training? Sprint, jog, sprint, jog. This is how you prevent strength loss. This is how you prevent muscle loss when you're training power, strength, and aerobic at the same time. So for instance, 10 seconds at 90% max speed. So it'd be close to a sprint. 20 seconds at jogging speed. You repeat that 30 times, gives you 15 minutes. So this is actually, it's interesting because this is technically an aerobic workout based on the fact that it's not going to be producing a lot of lactic acid. So when you use interval training, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 32 seconds, it doesn't really matter. You vary the rest, you vary the duration, there's all sorts of variables to play with. But ideally, when we're looking at building the aerobic side of things, we're looking at minimizing lactic acid production. Okay, so 2 ways we can do that. We shorten the work duration, so we take it less than 10 seconds, or we increase the amount of recovery. If we had 5 seconds recovery, 10 seconds of work, you guys would probably start building up some lactic acid pretty significantly, right? So we want to avoid that. Some studies have shown the reason for this is because myoglobin, that organelle in your muscle cells that stores oxygen, replenishes oxygen in and around 10 to 15 seconds. So if you start packing in a lot of work before that happens, you start building up lactic acid, whereas if you can keep things less than about 10 to 15 seconds on the work bout, you prevent that lactic acid accumulation from occurring. So those are 2 ways to play with those variables to minimize lactic acid production for aerobic training. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, cool. The cool thing as well with interval training is that, well, I'll explain it more in a second. Okay, so once your base is formed, interval training should be the only way, and I should highlight this, bold it, underline it 5 times. This should be the only way soccer players and all athletes other than marathon runners should use to get in shape for soccer outside of the gym. Okay? If you're a soccer player and you're going for a 30-minute jog, if that 30-minute jog is not a recovery jog, you're wasting your time and you should be benched. Okay? That's the way I see it. You're wasting time, you're wasting your body's ability to improve. The reason is because there are changes of speed and direction every 5 to 6 seconds in soccer. We're never running the length of the field at one pace. So you need to train like that. You need to train at 100% max speed. Do you know there are studies with type 2 diabetics that have shown that after a workout, if they just did one 10-second sprint, they could improve their insulin sensitivity? That's crazy. That's the power of working out at your max possible speed. Okay? So not from an insulin or blood glucose perspective, but simply the power of intensity. When it comes to training, it's all about intensity. That's all that matters. Well, not all that matters, but it's the most important variable. And the duration of work and recovery intervals will vary depending on the session goals. If your session is geared towards, okay guys, we're getting close to the season, we need to start building some anaerobic endurance so you can tolerate that lactic acid, well, let's start doing some work now where you're going to be working for 2 minutes and then we'll give you a minute off. So you haven't been able to flush out the lactic acid and then we go again. Okay? So you have to really understand the goals of the session to be able to sequence things properly. So here's a graph that I put together a couple years ago. Basically shows exercise intensity on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. This would be, for instance, a jog in the yellow, a sprint in the orange. And this dotted line represents your average heart rates. This squiggly dotted line represents your real-time heart rate. And this is why using a heart rate monitor while interval training is a waste of time. Because let's say you start off your first bout and your heart rate is your work bout heart rate is 180. Well, the next work bout, your heart rate is going to be 185. Because if you're doing things properly, you're not giving your body enough time to fully recover before the next work bout occurs. So what happens is you have this drift in your heart rate, which means that the average heart rate of your workout is a lot greater than what it would be if you went for a 75% max heart rate jog. And that's the beautiful thing about interval training, is that you can spend less time, in this case 11 minutes or 13 minutes, and get a much more powerful training effect because you spend more time near your maximal possible intensity. Okay? That is the true power of interval training. And as a soccer player, if you can do this, you're going to blow the competition out of the water. That's a picture of me. Not really. It's a stock image. But I was a goalie, so it's always nice. Okay, preseason. So let's assume that we're here at U of T. We've had the summer off. Here's the dilemma here. For guys who've played at U of T, they take the summer off, they go with their club teams, they don't necessarily have access to a gym for the most part. So all the work we did for 4.5 months downstairs gets flushed down the drain during the summer because all they're doing is playing soccer now. They're not continuing the strength work, they're not doing their power work. They come into preseason, they should be fit, but let's assume they're not. We're going to take 2 to 4 weeks here, and now we should have a good base to work with. We have our strength down, we've got our power down, more or less. We should have, coming into preseason, a good aerobic base. You shouldn't be spending time here running laps. So it should be game-specific, on-field conditioning. And really, ideally, it should be done with the ball. You shouldn't be running, shuttle runs back and forth during this time. I mean, you've spent like 7-8 months doing this stuff already. So now it should mainly be done with the ball, and that's where proper coaching comes in to be able to put together sessions that can incorporate elements of interval training where you're working your ass off for 5 seconds, taking 10 seconds off, going again, and so forth. So short burst intervals, anaerobic training would be minimal here, so 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on the goal of the session. Plyometrics, very important to do this in terms of maintaining power. I'll just tell you, from when I played at U of T, we trained 3 nights a week. We had 2 games. It's obviously changed quite a bit now. But I trained 4 days a week in the morning on my own in the gym. And I never got injured that I know of in all my playing career, other than a broken leg. And I attribute a lot of that to doing this type of stuff on my own. Training my muscles, keeping strong, and so that by the time I was on the fields, I wasn't coming down with stupid groin pulls. Okay, so plyometrics, doing this stuff during the preseason as well as in the season is very important. And again, most of this stuff can be done with the ball. Plyometrics you guys are familiar with, right? Bounding, hopping, stuff like that. Very, very important for power development. It's probably one of the best things you can do as an athlete. So we have the preseason down. Let's talk about in-season. This is where, again, I would say most athletes let things kind of fall off their plates. They stop doing things. They just play soccer and that's it. Here is very important to maintain what you're doing. Okay, so here we're going to be doing short burst intervals, maximum intensity, short duration. Recovery sessions, light jogging, stretching, yoga, foam rolling, very important. As we're in the season now, if you have 1 or 2 games a week, you're training several times a week, recovery is the most important thing during the season. The ability to recover between games is what's going to help you play in the next game or training session. So a light jog the day after a game is going to help you flush out some of the lactic acid. Stretching, yoga should be done on a daily basis. Okay? I just told you guys downstairs and here that static stretching is a waste of time before training or before a game. However, stretching and doing yoga on a daily basis or at the minimum of 3 times a week while your body is warm is probably one of the best things you can do in terms of preventing injuries. We started doing yoga with the team here a couple of years ago, and at first a bunch of the guys were like, oh, well, what is this? So I don't know. We'd stand in a circle at center and do yoga, and we'd do it before all of our games, well before our dynamic workout, warm-up, sorry. But a lot of the guys, I mean, they really started to enjoy it. Shaki, you enjoy it? It's pretty solid, right? So it makes a huge difference in terms of recovering, keeping your muscles long and limber. And then foam rolling as well is really powerful at flushing stuff out, keeping your tissues,
In case anyone's not familiar, can you elaborate on the foam rolling?
Yeah, do you guys know what foam rolling is? You guys ever been to those pools and those kids like killing each other with those little noodles? Okay, so imagine one of those noodles about 4 times the size in terms of girth and about this long, and all you do is you kind of roll on it. It's kind of like a self-massage technique, and it's really good for the IT bands, areas that you can't really massage by yourself. And the powerful thing is that it's a really good biofeedback mechanism in the sense that if you start crying while you're rolling out your IT bands, for instance, that's an indication that the tissue there is full of shit. There's a lot of stuff built up in there. Okay? So if you can get that stuff out, that's going to really help you feel good and recover a lot faster. Core training, plank, side plank, all sorts of other sport-specific core type of exercises is really important here. Yep.
Are you opposed to static stretching after your body's warmed up and like after a workout as well too?
No, not really. Static stretching after workout is better. However, keep in mind that if you've worked out, you've caused micro damage at the cellular level. Okay, so those microfibrils have just kind of pulled apart, and they're literally inflamed. So if you were to stretch that already kind of compromised fiber, you could make it worse. So that's the only thing to consider. So it depends on the type of workout you did. If you did a workout that was heavily damaging to your muscles, I wouldn't stretch. If you did something that was a little bit lighter, maybe if you just went for you did like an interval session, stretching afterwards after a cool down is okay. The really important thing here to remember, guys, is after a workout, it's not about the stretching. The stretching has nothing to do with reducing soreness. The most important thing is to keep moving. If you played soccer for 90 minutes and then sat on a bus, like we do a lot of times on road trips, what happens? You stiffen up, right? You guys know creep? Have you guys taken Doug Richards' course? Creep phenomenon? If you sit like this, you will end up like that eventually. That's why when you sit at a desk 9 hours a day, that's why people have the rolling shoulders and all that other stuff. So you need to move. That's the best way to prevent the stiffening, and it's the best way to get gunk out of your system after a training session or a game. So again, during the season, plyometrics, in addition to what you're doing in the field, is very important for maintaining power. I'll show you a study, I think, in a second about this. And then still, strength work in the gym. Focus on the big movements, the deadlifts, the squats. Make sure you don't injure yourself, obviously. Make sure you're doing this properly. But here, it's very minimal. 3 to 4 to 5 repetitions, 1 to 2 sets, heavy weight, just to maintain your strength. This is going to help with your confidence on the field. This is a very, very important thing to consider. Playing isn't enough. So here's a study by 2003. They looked at whether or not it was beneficial to basically do plyometrics during the season. And so what they looked at again was 36 female high school soccer players throughout a season, and whether with or without intermittent high intensity exercise, plyometric type stuff was beneficial. So the test included an abridged 45-minute shuttle test. I don't know how you can do a 45-minute shuttle test. That seems a really long time for a shuttle run. So I'm not sure there. Hydrostatic weighing, vertical jump. So vertical jump is really the power. 20-meter run, start, sprint. This is another power measurement, speed measurement, and a 30-second wind gate is anaerobic stuff. So the experimental group completed a 10-week in-season plyometric and resistance training program and high-intensity anaerobic program, so interval training. The control only did soccer training. Results, the experimental group showed significant improvements in the shuttle test, which is interesting considering they weren't really training for that. 20-meter sprints, which makes sense because they were training power. Increase in fat-free mass. If you strength train, you develop lean muscle, which burns more fat than fat does, so that's why you would increase your fat-free mass. Decrease in fat mass because you have more lean body mass now. And this is all compared to pre to post-season. Okay? So you get better performance measures by incorporating plyometrics in the season. And there's probably other research out there that shows, if not anecdotally, that if you drop off and just play soccer, you lose a lot of your gains. If you don't strength train for 4 weeks, you're still going to maintain to some degree on the field what you're doing, but it's not the same. You have to do some degree of strength training or power training in conjunction with the on-field stuff. That's what they do at the pro level. Okay? That's what they're doing. They're training. They have special training centers where they have programs that they're following to stay strong and powerful. Common mistakes. Too much off-field or plus on-field training. So if you train 5 days a week in the gym, 5 days a week on the field, it can lead to overtraining. Obviously, everyone's going to be different. Depends on how you adapt. Not enough off-field training. This, I think, is a huge one. Not enough soccer players focus on the stuff we've been talking about, so they're weak, they're injury-prone. Rest is crucial. Okay, this is something we haven't talked a lot about, but I firmly believe the less you do, the better it is, which is kind of ironic considering how much I've been talking about the importance of additional training, but we'll talk about this in a second. So how much training or playing is too much? Well, it depends. Individual differences. If you have a team of 20 guys or girls and you put out a training program, everyone's going to adapt differently. Everyone is not going to respond the same way. So it's very tough to individualize the training program on the field. Off the field, you can do a better job. You can say, okay, listen, I understand you have an issue with this. We'll substitute this in. You have adrenal fatigue. Okay, well, let's look at some ways to work around that. Recovery strategies will also come into play. So what you're doing to recover, stretching, cool downs, foam rolling, hot, cold contrast baths, stuff like that. And nutrition is very important for recovery. So my personal philosophy is less is more, okay? What is the minimum effective dose? Do you have to train 5 days a week, or is 3 days going to give you the same results? How do you find that out? Trial and error, pretty much. Okay, but think about it. Instead of it's like with running. Instead of running for hours and hours and hours and breaking your body down, if you knew that you could get better results in 20 minutes using interval training, wouldn't that be the minimum effective dose? Right. So that's where it's all about becoming a little bit smarter with how you schedule the stuff. I personally think no matter what the schedule, 1 to 2 days off is a must, and just completely off. You could do some active stuff if you want, but just get away from soccer, get away from the gym. Complete detachment, and this is more specific to guys and girls who are playing competitively for a large amount of the year. Complete detachment and having outside fun keeps you fresh. Okay? That's why school, if you continue to study and study and study, you just burn out. Right? You need to get away. You need to go have go on a bender one night with your friends, go to the brunny, right? You need to have that stuff. It's important, not the drinking necessarily, but to get away from what you're so focused on. The same with this. So get away from soccer, get away from training for a day or two, and have some fun, bring some perspective back in. And nutrition plays a bigger role than most people think. We're going to talk about that next. Does anyone have any questions with the training stuff that we just talked about? We good? Okay. Yes, Guido.
Kind of a general question.
Sorry.
Based on everything you talked about with the interval training, for example, the fact that 30-minute run that kind of normal, for example, what you used to do is kind of useless with soccer player.
Yep.
Now, sometimes it could be at the youth level as well, it could be at the higher level. You'll start a season, or you'll be in the preseason, or even the winter training or off season, and you've got, for want of putting this politely, an overweight kid in your program. And part of your focus is not only to get them at a kind of a peak playing level fitness-wise, when he's on their way, but you're also considering weight loss for that child, even if they're a little older.
Yep.
Do you take a different tack if that's part of your focus as well?
So,
I'm not wrong, I think you were talking about getting basically a peak performance shape.
yeah, the beautiful thing is that interval training is actually the most effective way to burn fat as well.
So you approach it the same way.
Absolutely. I mean, I work with a lot of people who want to burn fat, and we have specific workout programs based on interval training protocols that help them burn fat. If you focus on interval, if you have go for a couple runs, develop a bit of a base initially, but once you have that base, you have to be using interval training because you're working at a higher percentage of your maximum intensity. That naturally means you're burning more calories, which means you're burning more fat, right? So if you have two people, one's going for a 30-minute run, the other one's doing 20-minute intervals or 15-minute intervals, this guy is doing twice the work as the other person going for the light jog. He's burning more calories, he's going to burn more fat, he's also going to improve his performance. So it kills two birds with one stone.
So you subject them to the same sort of program and the same...
Yeah, I mean, like you may want to tone, like you can change the exercise, the duration of the work bout or the intensity of it, but remember for him or for her, his sprint would be different from the next person's sprint. So it's all relative. They want to give their 100%, so if that's a walk, then that's a walk, right? Somebody else might be like Usain Bolt, it's all relative. So yeah.
Just for everyone else, anyone who thinks that might be an off-color comment, it's not. If you do coach now or have, or if you will in the future, don't be surprised if you come across a situation where you have one or two players where, again, you can't put it politely, weight loss is an issue in part of your training program with them.
Yeah, childhood obesity is definitely, it's an epidemic, especially in the States. Thankfully, we live in Toronto. Any other questions before we move on to the nutrition? Yeah.
Just a small one. Would you say that you would train all positions, like for every single position the same way?
That's a good question. Initially, yes. But as a goalkeeper, I can tell you that the training demands are very different. So my training would consist of power and strength and agility. That's pretty much it. In a game situation, I'm standing around communicating with my team, and then boom, I'm diving.
What about midfields and forwards? Like, is there a slight difference between?
Yeah, again, it depends on the way the team plays, depends on the way the individual plays, depends on the systems. In general, if we were to kind of like just generalize this, midfielders generally need to have greater anaerobic endurance because they're doing a lot of this all over the place. Strikers, probably more out and out speed and power. Defenders, more jumping, vertical jump, so power. Definitely speed as well in terms of tracking defenders. I mean, Caps, you can talk, like, I don't know. Yeah, so there's going to be those differences, but as a minimum, if they all have the same base, it's going to be very important. And that's where it comes down to the individual as well. Again, we're not talking about training with 10-year-olds here for a second, but if you are, they're not going to have the wherewithal to go on their own and do the stuff in the gym. But if you have somebody who's a bit older, who's a bit more competitive, and they start to understand, okay, here are the demands of my position, here's what I need to do to improve that, then they can start doing stuff that's more tailored to them. So, yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about Guido.
Do you want to take a quick break or something for nutrition, or just keep going through?
Keep going? Motor through? Okay, this stuff is fascinating. I'm going to start dropping some truth bombs. I've also got some laws, which I'm trying to get passed by some nutrition board eventually. This is fascinating stuff. Okay, performance nutrition. We have two ways of looking at it. We have timing and quantity, which should indicate how we are fueling ourselves and about how we are immediately recovering. and the quality of our nutrition. So this is more pertaining to long-term health, improved recovery over time, reduced oxidative stress, better tissue quality. So when I played here, I ate McDonald's probably a couple times a week. I remember going to McDonald's before training sessions, and I'm sure a bunch of the guys still do, Shaki. Not you, but I'm sure you know guys who are not in this class at this moment who do. So you can get away with that initially in your early 20s. That's fine. You can still get away with that in terms of fuel and immediately recovering to some degree. But in the long term, your long-term health, you're done, okay? Michael Phelps, you guys know Michael Phelps and his like 13,000 calorie a day diet? Pizza, pancakes, garbage, right? Once he stops swimming, do you think he's all of a sudden miraculously going to change the way he eats? No. It's going to take a lot of willpower and effort. The long-term health of Phelps will be compromised because of that. So you can be fit, but not necessarily healthy. Okay, there's a big distinction there. Okay, so here's my kind of workout nutrition hourglass. Up here, this would be several hours before training or a workout or a game. As we get closer to the workout or the game, we kind of funnel in, and then right after the game or workout, we funnel out again. Okay, so this is a very simple way of remembering this stuff. Initially, several hours out, we're thinking about complex foods, more whole foods, complex carbs, stuff like that. As we get closer to competition or training, it becomes simpler. And as we move out, it becomes complex again. So let's look at those specific examples. So 3 to 4 hours before a game or training session, you want to focus on larger, complex meal based around carbohydrates. Okay, carbohydrates is going to be your predominant fuel source for sports, especially soccer. What does this mean? Well, I don't believe it means eating white pasta. I do believe that it incorporates eating better versions of complex carbohydrates. So let me just mention that if you're like Shaki and you have an Italian background, you'll do fine with pasta. If you're not, it's the truth. Like he can eat white pasta all day, no problem. For me, if I eat white pasta, I'm falling asleep. So you have to understand what works for your body. In general, depending on where you're brought up culturally, you'll respond better to those foods. So some examples, the problem with white pasta is that it's refined. It spikes your blood sugar, leading to a spike in insulin, leading to a crash. So that's not very good sustained energy. It's also not a very health-promoting food. So some better examples might be steel-cut oatmeal with berries, almond butter, and flax oil. Or a vegetable omelet with a side of black beans, avocado, and tomato. Or a big green smoothie. So that would be 3 to 4 hours before training or a game. Next, we're going to move closer to workouts or our game time. So 30 to 60 minutes before, we can look at having a banana if you need to get your blood sugar up for whatever reason. If you feel low on blood sugar, you can have a banana. You can have Yuri's all-natural sports drink. This is not something you can get at a health food store. This is essentially my proprietary blend, which I will give you right now. So if you want to write this down, it's about 500 milliliters of water, 2 to 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. No, it's actually really good. It's delicious. It's way better than Gatorade. So you have 2 to 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, the juice of half a lemon, the juice of half a lime, and a pinch of sea salt. If you want to take it up to the next level, you can substitute the water with coconut water. Coconut water is nature's Gatorade. The problem with Gatorade, not that you guys really care at this time of your life, I think, is the dyes and the coloring. Okay, that stuff is not good for your nervous system. But if that's all you have access to, that's better than nothing. Or you could do orange juice with glutamine, for instance, or any kind of branched chain amino acids, or a small amount of a fruit smoothie. Simple sugars. Yeah.
Is there a reason for the lemon and the lime?
Yeah, well, can you repeat that part about the lime?
Yeah, so it's partly a flavor thing. So take half of a lemon, squeeze it in, take half of a lime, squeeze it in. A couple reasons. Flavor, it's just going to enhance the flavor a lot more. Secondly, they provide some important antioxidants, vitamin C specifically, which is going to help reduce the oxidative stress from the exercise. So that's probably why. You could squeeze in an orange. You could squeeze in a grapefruit. You know, whatever turns floats your boat. 2 to 3 tablespoons. So again, simple sugars. This is not stuff you want to drink on while you're sitting in the room. But if you need to get your blood sugar up a little bit before competition, during or after, these are some great examples. So again, smaller, simpler snack based around simple sugars. It's optional. You don't need to do this. Okay, so now we have our workout, our game. We finished. Now what do we do afterwards? Well, immediately after, we'd go back to the all-natural sports drink, some salted dates or salted banana or dates. The reason for salting is just to get some sodium back in. You've lost some electrolytes in sweat. This is going to bring some of that back in. Banana is naturally high in potassium. You could bring in some salt if you want. Yep.
Yeah, when you say salted banana, you literally mean like putting salt on a banana?
Yeah.
You mean like buying salt?
No, I don't know if you can buy salted bananas, but just literally take a bit of salt and sprinkle it on a banana. So yeah, it's a pretty simple way to do it. Dates are a very good source of glucose. They're one of the only fruits actually that have more glucose than fructose, so they don't have to bypass or they don't have to go through the liver in terms of breakdown and stuff. So it's actually really nice for getting replenishment right back in. Again, a small amount of fruit smoothie. If you just happen to have a blender, handy and you've got some fruit, go for it. Again, so essentially what we're doing here is we're doing the exact same thing we did before, immediately before the game or the training session. We're just flipping it, right? The important thing here, remember how I said earlier that glycogen is the most important fuel source for soccer? This is why this is very important to understand. After your game or your training session, if you play 90 minutes, you're depleting your glycogen. Like you're literally probably about half to 3/4 of your glycogen is going to be gone depending on your position. So in order to recover quickly, you need to replenish that fuel. So if you, just as an example, if you drove from here to Montreal, what would happen? Your fuel would go down, right? So what do you do when your fuel goes down? You fill it up. Okay, it's the same thing here. Your glycogen is like your fuel tank. When you're low on fuel, you got to fill it up, and that's what we're doing with the glycogen. That's what we're doing with the simple sugars, which then get assimilated into muscle and liver glycogen. A question about protein that a lot of people ask, well, if I'm working out, should I have protein right after my workout? No. Well, I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to say it's not as important as milk commercials want you to believe it is. Research has shown, and you'll find research actually that shows anything. So when I say research has shown, you can find the complete opposite as well. That's the state of science. But essentially, there is research that shows that one group of people having a certain amount of protein right after a workout versus another group of people having no protein until 24 hours after a workout. The group that did not eat anything, protein-wise, for 24 hours had more muscle, or I should say more protein synthesis, as opposed to right after the workout. Okay? So it doesn't make a lot of sense based on what we've been indoctrinated to believe. But here's the thing to understand. Your body has pools of amino acids in your liver, mainly. When your body is low on protein, or specific amino acids, and it needs to build protein, for instance after a workout or whatever stage, it turns to that amino acid pool in your liver and it says, you know what, we're missing lysine, we're missing cysteine, we got to combine this stuff, let's turn to the pool of amino acids, we'll build the protein there and ship it out to the tissues. Okay, so the timing of your protein does not matter at all. All that matters is your average protein intake over time. If you eat nothing at all for 30 days, you'll obviously be compromised in terms of that amino acid pool in your protein. But in terms of eating protein before or 27 minutes after a workout or all that nonsense, it means nothing. What's more important is replenishing glycogen where there is a window of opportunity of about 30 minutes. So if you do not replenish the glycogen with simple sugars immediately after the workout, that's why if you see any professional soccer players on TV, a lot of times, like their trainer is like coming up to them after the game and giving them like Powerade or Lucozade or one of those sports drinks on the field as they're shaking hands. The reason for that is because they know that they have a very small window of opportunity to replenish the muscle glycogen so that these guys can recover as fast as possible. Okay? Any questions with that? Yeah.
Okay, totally separate, but I play a different sport.
Yep.
So I do weightlifting. So
Mhm.
is it different in that sense?
Nope, the research actually comes out of bodybuilding. Yeah, because that's where most people are using protein supplements, is right after a bodybuilding workout. Oh my God, my muscles are shrinking, right? The research just doesn't show it. And the research in terms of building muscle also shows that regardless of how much protein you eat, the average person will build 3 to 7 pounds of muscle over 12 weeks. This is an average person. I'm talking about like guys and girls your age. The only difference in terms of boosting muscle growth is testosterone. So there's been studies that have had guys like cranking up like 300 grams of protein a day, like tons of protein, and there's no difference between those people or those who had the 0.8 grams per kilogram of body mass, which works out to be, in some cases, for instance, in my case, so it's 65 grams of protein a day, which should be 2 chicken breasts, or in some cases, 1 smoothie, or a couple eggs, right? You don't need as much protein as you need. Protein is very important, but we don't need as much as we need. Do athletes need a little bit more? Maybe. So instead of 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, you're looking at maybe 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. Yeah?
I was going to say, so for that kind of program for nutrition, do you see usually the athletes' weight go up a little bit? Because, I mean, you kind of want to have like an upper body strength and stuff like that, or do you want to maintain?
Sorry,
Or like based on the nutrition, based on like the carbs and all that.
Yeah, I mean, gaining weight comes down to calories. That's it. Gaining weight and losing weight it's a calorie game. It's physics. So if you want to put on weight,
Do the same thing if you want to put on like a bit of weight, for example, while training for something.
yep, the sequence is the same. So carbohydrates immediately after the workout. You can throw in some protein if you want. It's not going to hurt you. But in terms of being fanatical about it, like guys like sitting on the bench doing a set and then drinking their whey protein or whatever they're drinking, I don't know. I mean, you can spend your money on whole foods and get a lot better results. The key, if you're looking to build size, is simply eat more. And that's a challenge because it's tough to eat a lot of food all day long. You had a question?
Oh, I was just asking, I kind of missed it. You said regardless of the amount of protein you take in, on average you build about 3 to how many pounds?
3 to 7 pounds. And this is generally for males. Women would be different.
And it's over a span of 12 weeks?
12 weeks.
Okay.
12 to 16 weeks, depending on the study.
Sorry, one quick question. So going back to the like obesity case, when someone is a little overweight,
Yep.
is it harmful to like not add in like the complex carbs and just do like the simple for them to like lose weight while training, or would that be like too much for them?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes, the thing with obesity and overweight is that the simple sugars are the reason that or part of the reason that's happened. So when I say simple sugars, I want it to be very clear that I'm only saying eat those types of simple sugars in and around a workout or a game. In general, if you're just snacking, not a good idea, okay? Fruits are the exception because fruits have fiber which delay the release of those sugars into the liver, so you don't get the same effect as if you're drinking Coke. But for someone who wants to lose weight, still complex carbs are important. But complex carbs, it's important to understand the difference. Right? Complex carbs are like pasta, but complex carbs are also sweet potatoes. So thinking about more plant-based foods like sweet potatoes, squashes, all of those are amazing sources of glycogen, for instance, of carbohydrates for glycogen, and they're much healthier for you. Very high sources of vitamin A, fiber, all that stuff. You don't get the same with pasta, white pasta, because it's going to spike your blood sugar. You don't get the same thing with the complex carbs. So, believe me, nutrition is a universe. As much as we know about it, there's so many other questions that we have no idea about. So, okay, so apparently I don't know why the sequencing of these bullets is not working. But anyways, 1 to 2 hours after a game, we've replenished the glycogen window. So now we're going to, again, go back out the funnel, and we're looking to larger complex meals based around carbohydrates, healthy proteins, healthy fats. So it's essentially just a whole food, well-rounded meal. Examples: salmon, sweet potato, avocado, big salad. Quinoa, do you guys know what that is? Quinoa salad with black bean chili. See recipes. Sorry, there's no recipes here. That was obviously from somewhere else. Do you guys know what nori is?
Yeah.
Sushi, the wrapping, it's amazing. A huge source of minerals, awesome stuff. Nori wrap with mango and avocado, a big salad, or a big green smoothie with nuts and seeds. So these are all examples of kind of bigger, complex meals that you can enjoy that don't necessarily revolve around pasta all the time. See, the problem with a lot of have you guys taken nutrition at all at U of T? Okay, so I'm gonna give you my 2 cents. I was half a credit shy from a minor in nutrition when I went through phys ed. The main reason I stopped was because I was just sick and tired of the nonsense they're teaching, like how much vitamin C you need, what's the RDA, what's the the DRI. Who cares, right? All we want to know is like what can we apply in our lives? And the problem with stuff that's taught in the academic realm of nutrition is that in respect to sports, it's only considering the quantitative side, really. I remember when I was in school and asking, different professors, as an athlete, what should I eat? Well, you should be eating lots of potatoes, lots of pasta, lots of breads, lots of cereals. I'm like, well, that's how I've been eating for most of my life, and I feel terrible. So obviously something is not right. Everyone responds differently to the same foods. If you and I both have broccoli, we're going to respond differently. And this is a whole other field called nutrigenomics, which basically means that food impacts your DNA. So if you have an apple, it will literally go into your DNA and change things, either for good or bad. It's amazing stuff, okay? Everyone responds differently to salmon, to sweet potato, to avocado. So you have to find what works best for you. Maybe it is white pasta, I don't know. Yeah, Lush.
So, in terms of 1 to 2 hours after a game,
Yep.
East Side Mario's is not a good idea.
Again, you have to do the best with what you have access to, right? So, do you guys know the East Side Mario stories? So with the soccer team, if we go to like Kingston or elsewhere, Caps loves East Side Mario's. So East Side Mario's would be the place to congregate after a game for a meal. But the reality is that the only other options are Wendy's, McDonald's, Starbucks, or you go to the grocery store and you buy a ton of stuff and you make it in the hotel if you can. That's just not feasible for most times. So in that case, it's the best option available. So yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, but if you're in Toronto and you have access to other stuff, there are better options. Okay, let's talk about the qualitative side of nutrition. And this is where I really get passionate. So if I start throwing F-bombs, I apologize. I'm not going to do it. Okay. Health equals performance. If you're healthy, you will be performance. If you're sick, you're not going to perform well. Okay? You can be fit, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. There are a lot of guys who, in their early 20s, can get away with eating McDonald's and whatever they want. But again, as you get older, that starts to catch up with you. And even at that age, if you have McDonald's every day and you're playing soccer 5 days a week, there's still stuff happening in your arteries that you can't detect. Okay? Heart disease, do you guys know what the first symptom is? Heart attack. Okay? So there's no symptoms for high blood pressure. There's no symptoms for atherosclerosis. It's a heart attack pretty much. So we want to prevent that. Okay, so here are some things that I'm calling Elkaim's laws. These have yet to be passed, but I'm putting it out there. I think you'll really appreciate them. Okay, so the law of commonality states that how you heal anything is how you heal everything. Let that sink in for a second. Okay, if you want to lose weight, or if you want to recover from disease, if you want to prevent cancer, if you want to prevent osteoporosis, the approach is the same, pretty much. Okay, I'm the self-acclaimed professor of a program called Super Nutrition Academy, and in the modules, we basically teach everyday people how to become their own health master. And one of the things that I continue to come across every module is, for instance, we're talking about nutrition recommendations for cardiovascular disease, nutrition recommendations for preventing cancer naturally. I just did one today on how to live longer. And this is all, again, it's all research-based. It's not just stuff I'm making up. And it's always the same stuff. eat a whole food-based diet, mostly plants, eat less, eat more raw foods. That's what it comes down to, okay? No matter what you want to do. If you want to lose weight, if you want to have a healthier heart, if you want to prevent Alzheimer's, it's the same, more or less. There's obviously a couple, differences here and there, but for the most part, if someone wants to lose weight, it's also the same approach that's going to give them way more energy. It's also the same approach that's going to reduce their blood sugar to an acceptable level. So that is my law of commonality.